Lord have mercy on us all. Hello, my sweet little honey badgers. We're coming out of it. We're coming out of the age of emotional suppression. And the other day, I did a post about how we end up looping in our emotions and how to not do that. So today, we are going into what people do to suppress their emotions, which I have to say, suppressing your emotions and looping in them, either way, we're not getting anywhere, baby. Okay, so let's get started. Number one, can we come into a normal accent? Can we do that? Number one, avoidance. So what does that mean? That's pretty obvious, right? We are steering clear of situations and people and topics that make us uncomfortable. Avoiding conversations or places that could elicit memories or feelings of anger or sadness or anxiety. I want to say this though, avoiding something, literally not dealing with it, is so very different from consciously choosing to have a boundary where, you know what, I'm actually not going to talk to this person because every time I do, the conversation goes nowhere. So we can avoid things consciously because we have dealt with it. And that is a conscious boundary and a choice that we are making to preserve our own well-being. So that is so fundamentally different. I just wanted to make that little clarification. The next one, which is distraction. So we've got avoidance. Okay, number two is distraction. This can go both ways. Meaning that distraction can be something, again, that we use to quite literally just perpetually avoid whatever it is. We're going to do activities that keep our mind busy. We're going to work long hours. We're going to binge watch TV. We're going to doom scroll. We're going to use substances, whatever it is. Anything but actually deal with what we need to be dealing with. That being said, in distress tolerance, when we look at something like dialectical behavior therapy, so DBT skills. There is a whole long list of distraction when you are learning to build your capacity that is actually a form of titration. That's a form of taking things in small chunks. So if your system is totally overloaded and you find some type of a sensory item to play with as a distraction so that you actually have the capacity to process what's happening. If you need to go watch a movie so that you can get your nervous system down a little bit, maybe you don't have, this somatic release practice really built in yet. Maybe you don't know how to fully release your emotions yet. Maybe you literally just need to hit the pause button on something so that you can effectively come back to it and have the capacity to do that. That is fundamentally different from just distraction after distraction after distraction and keeping yourself away from the painful emotions. Okay, so avoidance, distraction. Number three, which of course could fall into distraction or avoidance, would be substance use. So using drugs, using alcohol or other substances to numb how it is that you're feeling, to escape reality, to go into another world where you're actually suppressing what's going on for you. And all this really does, we know, is create a backlog. So you end up just having more issues, and now you have a dependency issue on top of it, and you're blowing out your dopamine receptors. Okay, number four is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. This is where we convince ourselves that our emotions are unwarranted, are exaggerated. So I shouldn't feel this way, right? I shouldn't feel this way. It's gaslighting yourself, okay? And I'm going to tell you right now that if you've ever been in a relationship with somebody who is incredibly narcissistic, maybe that was a primary caregiver, maybe that was a partner, maybe it was both, maybe it was a friendship that you were in. Those individuals who have not worked on themselves and they have those narcissistic traits and qualities to one degree or another, could be extreme, could be mild, will make you go crazy inside of your own head and will turn you against yourself because somebody with these qualities is quite literally unable to process their own shame. So everything gets projected and deflected back onto you, which I'm going to get to later on. I'm not trying to get too ahead of myself right now. Okay. So when we have cognitive dissonance, we have pitted ourselves against ourselves. I shouldn't be feeling this way. What does that do? That leads to internal conflict. It means that we have parts of us that are at war with each other. And that can literally feel like a living hell, if I'm being honest with you. Number 5, intellectualization. And oh, baby, Don't we love this one in our culture? Don't we love this one? We love to intellectualize things. We love to stay in the mind and in the story. And why is that? Because most of us were not taught how to drop it low and drop it into the BODY because it wasn't safe, right? The mind became a sanctuary. And it actually didn't become a sanctuary. It became a war zone. It became a place of getting stuck, right? In the last post that I did about the looping, rumination, that goes right up in here with the intellectualization. And this is why we can get stuck, because we're in the story, baby. We want to go, we want to talk about all the details. We want to try to make sense of everything. When some of the most effective forms of actual therapy in terms of processing things like PTSD, it involves the nervous system, the body, the somatic release. So we've got to be able to feel what's happening in the body and come out of freeziness and come out of numbness and actually work with what's happening instead of coming up into the mind. So we might, analyze the problem and try to put all these pieces together, but it's kind of like rearranging. I had somebody say this to me once, that their experience of talk therapy, which by the way, cognitive behavioral therapy, if done correctly, and generally speaking in adjunct to other things, is not a bad thing. I mean, not all practitioners are created equal, but there's a lot of benefits to cognitive behavioral therapy. But if we're just talking about our problems, this woman said, it's a little bit like rearranging the furniture of a room. We're just kind of, let's move the table over here, let's move this thing over here, but nothing is really changing. Sure, now the table is over there, but what have we really done? So number 6 is minimization, which goes right up there with the self-gaslighting, with the cognitive dissonance. So we are downplaying the significance of our own emotions and of our own experiences. It's really not that big of a deal. It's really not that big of a deal. Others have it worse. I cannot tell you how much damage minimization does. And the minimization can be so ingrained that people will literally, I've had people tell me so many times, I don't really have trauma. I don't really think that trauma is affecting me. And when you look at this person's life, when you look at what they experience on a day-to-day basis and if you were to be a fly on the wall in that person's life, if you were to be inside of their body, I'm sorry, what? And you're going to tell me that it wasn't that big of a deal? Then why are we looking at what we're looking at right now? Okay? Very damaging. And this is starting to change. This culture is starting to change as people are becoming aware that little t traumas can have just as much of an impact as big T traumas. Just as much. The things that as an adult you might look back and go, I don't really think that that's trauma. It can be. Now, every system is different. So what could be traumatizing to one person is not necessarily traumatizing for another person. That's why it is a subjective experience. We can't say, on a piece of paper, this is trauma and this is not trauma. It is system by system. It is an individual basis. Number 7, overcompensation. Oh, we also love that one in the Western world, don't we? So overcompensation, this goes right in line with the primary protector parts. Why is that? Because primary protectors help us to cope with the aspects of ourself that we could not own, that we are afraid to own. Oh no, something really bad is gonna happen if I bring that part of me out that has boundaries. Oh, something really bad is gonna happen if I bring out my positive emotions. That can happen for people. Oh, something really bad is gonna happen if I commit to my life. Go on and on and on and on. Something really bad is gonna happen if I don't take responsibility for everything. Oh, something really bad is gonna happen if I don't if I actually accept the reality of the pain that I've caused somebody else. So we might become very defensive, right? Overcompensation is that we're acting in a way that is opposite of what we're actually feeling. Now, here's the thing. We can contain multiple feeling experiences at the same time. And this goes into that splitting, that fragmentation where we have inner polarities that are creating a sense of inner conflict. So we're acting, right? We might be acting out of our own capacity. We might be showing up, and what you're seeing on the outside is, I'm really capable and responsible and strong, but on the inside, there's inadequacy and there's wounds of unworthiness. And so it's the inside's not matching the outside. You might see somebody smiling and being, I'm so happy, a cheerful facade, because that's a coping mechanism, because they don't believe that it's okay to actually be honest with themselves and the people in their life about the fact that I'm sad, or I'm going to just pretend to be happy. I'm love and light, positive affirmations that we just smear on top of our actual true feelings and experiences to avoid confronting them. Okay, so that's a form of suppression, overcompensation. Number 8, self-criticism. Here come the parts again. Inner critic, super strong. Engaging in what? Negative self-talk, which is interesting, right? Because that's the same thing that can keep us looping. You're going to notice that the list of what keeps us looping in our emotions and a lot of the things that we do to suppress our emotions, there's a lot of overlap here. So talking to ourselves negatively, we've got that strong inner critic. And what does that do? It keeps a biofeedback loop going of shame and guilt. And then we just end up suppressing the reality of what's really going on underneath that. What's vulnerable? Why is it so important that that inner critic is so loud? And that inner critic may be saying like, you're stupid for feeling like this. Or that inner critic might be like, nothing is ever going to work for me. Or that inner critic might be like, you are ugly, right? It could be any of those things. And that critic is there as a protector part to do what? To keep you from what is actually vulnerable. But the irony of it is that it doesn't really do that, right? It was a survival mechanism, not a thrival mechanism. So you outgrow that mechanism and what? You end up being at war with yourself, and then you just end up feeling worse. Because the goal of the inner critic is to keep you good. But all it really ends up doing is making you feel like shit. So this is why we have to work with the inner critic to bring it into the system in a way that becomes more like a guide, more like a, hey, you know what? I can see the areas where we might need to improve, but I'm not going to beat you up, because nobody actually makes effective change through being shamed. Okay, number 9, physical exercise can be a way of suppressing emotion. So obviously exercise is healthy. We all should be exercising. We should be moving our bodies to the degree that we have the capacity to. That being said, I cannot tell you how many people I have worked with who are in a functional freeze or are high-powered, women, CEOs of companies, and they are struggling to process their emotions, but they can do that 5-mile run, or, becoming obsessed with exercise and training, and it can become an overcompensation, right? You see how these things start to all refer to each other. So it's a way of disengaging from what happens when we slow down and using it as a way of escaping, okay? It doesn't have to be that. It just can be. Physical exercise can be a way of connecting with yourself more deeply. Any tool can be used as a way of helping yourself. Not any tool, but most tools can be used as a way of helping yourself. And they can also be a way of hurting yourself, okay? It's important to remember. It's how we approach the thing. So if we're going about healing from a place of self-hate, that healing's not going to go very well. It's going to maybe start off good, and then we're going to crash and burn, or we're not going to be able to get action. If you're exercising from a place of self-hate, that's not going to go well. It's not going to last. The way that we approach, the energy from which we are approaching these things matters. Okay, so that's number 9, physical exercise or activity. Number 10 is Stoicism. So this is adopting beliefs and values of emotional restraint and control and suppression. So we see this a lot within like the boomer generation and some of the children that came out of the Depression era, where it's like, especially a lot of fathers that are, I'm not an emotional person, I'm stoic. And to be clear, there are benefits to utilizing Stoicism in a way, right, where we're not becoming overly identified. That was something in the post around what keeps us looping in emotions. We can become so identified with our emotions that we are like, I am an anxious person, and I'm, and we can't get the disidentification. So the positive element of Stoicism is that we can disidentify. We can actually have a sense of restraint, like healthy restraint, where we're not abusing other people, where we're not becoming dangerous to ourselves or someone else, but simply adopting the belief and value that you need to control and restrain your emotions so that you are strong and composed is very dangerous. And that is going to reap some bad results. Okay, so 10 is Stoicism. Number 11 is social withdrawal. So we can suppress our emotions by isolating ourselves, because human relationships are the greatest mirror in terms of growth and development and facing the inner world and bringing that inner world out into relationship with another person. When we become isolated, we're not getting that back and forth, that energetic exchange that actually allows us to get in touch with what is happening. Now, for some people, it's again, these things go both ways, because we can withdraw and be with ourselves as a way of connecting with our emotions more deeply. But we can also withdraw as a way of just literally avoiding confronting or discussing our feelings. And then loneliness ends up sometimes leading to more emotional suppression, and then we can just shut down. Okay, so number 12 is journaling or writing without reflection. So we can write down all these thoughts and feelings, but not actually process them. It's a little bit like I'm talking about this thing, but I'm not actually processing it. I'm not actually moving the energy through the body. I'm not actually getting to a place of resolve, right? So that's kind of similar to the just staying stuck in the story. So we need to not just write about it, but we need to have the reflection. Number 13 is overscheduling ourselves, keeping ourselves busy with commitments and obligations. So this is right up there with like the overcompensation. Now we can overcompensate in a lot of different ways, but this could be one of them. Keeping ourselves busy all the time. I've got all these things to do. I'm so busy. I never have time. Sometimes I will sit down with a client of mine and like, it's hard to go, okay, so what is it that's coming up for you this week? What is it? Now for myself, I'm very aware of what's coming up for me because I'm not overscheduling myself. I have time to actually know and sense and feel what layers of my being are revealing itself to me and what I'm moving through and developing and growing into. When you just keep yourself busy all the time and then you finally sit down in a session with your practitioner and they're like, so what's alive in you today? And you don't even know what's alive in you because you've just been going from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, keeping yourself so busy that you don't even have time to drop in with yourself. That is a way of suppressing emotions, okay? Number 14, denial. Just flat out denial. Refusing to acknowledge the reality of where you are at. That could be denying your positive emotions, but usually it's denying the negative. If you do not know the reality of the hell that you are in, you cannot get out of that. If you cannot acknowledge the reality of how you feel for some reason or another, because it hasn't been safe for you to do that, or you are afraid of what will happen if you're honest with yourself and you have to go back there and actually open up that box, then we end up becoming not only distance from ourselves, but also distance from other people. When we're doing this to ourselves, we are likely doing this to other people as well in very overt or subtle and covert ways. So when you deny yourself the reality of your own emotions, you are not going to have the capacity to understand and be with another person's emotional experience because it's uncomfortable, right? And all of that can end up leading to like deflection, like I'd said in the beginning, right? Where, oh, that's your problem. That's your problem. That has nothing to do with me, right? Suppress, stuff down, stuff down, stuff down. Or will project, because when you don't process what's going on for you, you're going to start seeing that in other people, whether you really are seeing that in other people or not. You're either going to be a match to people who literally mirror your own shit, but you won't see it about yourself because you are that disconnected, or you will literally put an overlay on top of other people that is not what's actually happening, but you will be convinced that that is what's happening because that's how the mirror works. When you don't dig into what's happening here, you're going to be confronted with that, whether it's through your own projection or through the literal embodiment of that outside of yourself. So there we go. There we go. I hope you guys are well. I hope you're having a great Sunday. And anybody who is curious about what it means to go deeper within yourself. You want somebody who's good with parts work. You want to do some soul retrieval. You want to work with your nervous system capacity and get real-time discharge of survival energy. That's what I do. So reach out to me, fill out an intake form. Do not book a discovery call with me unless you have filled out an intake form. Sometimes I'm waitlisted. Right now I'm not waitlisted, so we're open, baby. Be well.